Hello everyone, welcome again to this Python course. So we've touched here the variables concept on the past lecture. Now let's do something. Let me create two variables where I'll call my number 1, which will be 20, and my number 2, which will be 30. You'll notice that when I run this code, there's no output. That's something that I think I forgot in the last lecture. There's no output because as soon as I assign it to something, this cell doesn't contain anything. This cell doesn't contain a returning element. But I know that when I have assignments, that the my number right now has the element 20 and that the my number 2 has the element 30. But Python doesn't return anything from this block of code here in notebooks. This is specific to notebooks, okay? Just know that when you are doing assignments and when the last instruction is an assignment and you don't have any prints, then nothing will be returned in the output cell. Okay, but even so, you run this code, you know that it's executed because of this number right here, and I can test that by calling my number 1, my number 2, and I'll know that these variables are assigned as I want. Okay, so if I want to, another thing is that I can assign two variables in the same block of code. Okay, no worries about it. I can assign 100 variables in the same cell of code here in notebooks. If my number 1 represents the number 20 and if my number 2 represents the number 30, can I multiply these two numbers, these two variables by each other? Let's see. My number 1 times my number 2. Yes, I can, because everything, a variable reflects everything of its underlying data type, okay? Because I have 20 and I have 30, these are two numbers, and all the elements that we've known so far from integers and everything that we've learned so far is propagated to the name of the variable. So the name of the variable will behave, or the variable will behave exactly as we expect an integer to behave, okay? So that's why I can multiply one by the other, because these are integers. This is exactly the same as having 20 times 30, but instead of typing the numbers, we are typing the name of the variables. Another cool thing is that I can play around with this really well. I can assign this result 600 to another variable. I can do result is equal to my number 1 times my number 2. And now this is starting to make a lot of sense, right? This is starting to make our code a bit more flexible. We can play around with numbers, we can play around with variables. Variables can mean something. We can do calculations on the variables. The variables may return some name that also makes some sense in terms of what we are trying to define. This will make a lot of sense, and you'll see that. So if I run result equals to my number 1 times my number 2, I'll have, of course, stored in the result, I'll do a print this time, 600, the result from this calculation. And notice, in a single line of code, I don't have any number written, but I have in the returning elements a number. But that's interesting because the names represent the underlying objects in the variable. My number 1 represents an integer, my number 2 represents an integer. When we multiply two integers, we get an integer, and then result also represents the returning integer, in this case 600. Just to make this point of the variables represent the underlying elements, let me call my name, for example, equals to evil. Sorry for being so basic and having a variable with my name. If I try to do the absolute function that we've learned, that only works on numbers, on my name, of course, I'll have our good old mistake that this is not suitable for strings. Okay, so the my name that I have right now is mimicking everything we know about strings, because the underlying object that's saved in this variable is also a string, in this case, the string with my name. Okay, just be sure that you remember this. Finishing up this intro on variables, I think we'll have a lot of opportunities to work with this also, but finishing this up, just have another concept that is interesting, and I think that it's worth to explain. Oh, before, there's also a thing that I want to explain. So this equals, one equality means assignment of variables. When you want to compare if two elements are equal, for example, 1 equals 1, we use 2 equals. So 1 equal is assignment, 2 equals is comparison. Make sure you remember that, because this is one of the most common mistakes that people do when they try to code in Python, which is they're trying to do a comparison using the assignment element, and that will yield to some weird bugs in your code. So if I do 1 equals 1, of course this is true. If I try to assign 1 to 1, this will yield error, because I'm trying to assign the value 1 to a value 1. Doesn't make much sense. So just be sure that you remember that 1 equal assignment, 2 equals comparison and equality, or at least trying to compare two elements. Before we leave, let's go for an interesting concept, which is, let me put A is equal to a string with var, and B is equal to A. I can do this. What I'm saying is that A is var, B is equal to A. Now, an important thing is that when I run this, and if I print B right now, I have a variable, right? So I have this var because it's the same element as A. Let me try to change A to 21, for example. Do you think that B was changed? Let's see. So if I go to print A, I confirm it's a 21. So this I think we can cut. Then if I try to print B, I'll have the same element as before. So this is not updated automatically in most scenarios, okay? So if I have a reference of a variable at a specific moment in time, that variable will keep that reference at a specific moment in time. It doesn't change dynamically. In some cases, and some certain subtypes of objects, changing A will change B. But those are edge cases and certain scenarios. When you are working with single elements, particularly, this will not happen, okay? Updating A will not update B. If B references A, the B will keep the reference at that point in time, or the point where the code was ran and what A had at that moment. This is not super important for now, not many use cases for us to do, but just important concept to keep in mind, that if we do this, this doesn't update automatically for single elements. Okay, so from this section that grasps concepts that are super important for Python, just the conversions and now variables that we've grasped a lot in this notebook, or at least in these past couple of lectures, we are still missing one, which are comparisons. For example, this comparison that I've done right here, 1 equals to 1 or double equals to 1, is one comparison element. We'll check this with more detail in the next lecture. Again, hope you are enjoying the course. This has been clear for you. Particularly, I'm expecting that you've never picked up Python in your life. Until now, you've been understanding everything that we've been saying, or that we've been studying. So if you are not, if you have any question about this, drop me a message and I'll be happy to help you. Okay, so let's move on to comparisons, and I'll see you in the next lecture.